couple more seasons, looking at the next chapter? Where are you at with rugby life, etc.?
Mate, I'm in a place where, being obviously at the back end of your footy career, like from a rugby perspective, I just really enjoying the game. Like I said earlier, I think coming over here, you sort of cut loose from more that sort of bubble of pressure and high performance. And I mean, don't get me wrong, like I obviously have a lot of I put a lot of pressure on myself to perform to the standard that I expect, but you sort of come over here and you experience rugby for the pure enjoyment, but also you're here for a bigger reason, which is to experience the culture, experience the people, and experience something different. And it's certainly for me, that's sort of refreshed and rejuvenated, my spirit in a sense to want to continue to play the game. My contract's up here in May next year, and I'm certainly keen to do another 2 years. And after that, coaching has definitely been something that I've been interested in. I'd like to sort of move into that space. I like the idea of skill development and helping younger players sort of fulfill their potential. So that's something that I've been sort of delving into a little bit.
Interesting. Do you, or are you someone who, at this point of your career, you look back and all that you've achieved? Are you very much in the moment? Are you not interested in that sort of reflection? How do you look back on what you've achieved so far, which is extraordinary as the story goes?
I don't really look back at it. I mean, just I try to be a little bit more in the moment because say when we finished the Rugby World Cup in 2019, obviously we were knocked out by England. That was the end of a huge chapter because I'd retired from Test footy. So for a week or two, I sort of sat back and realised that was over. And I sort of reflected. You look back, but then you realise that that's just one door closing and there's another one opening, which was the adventure here in Japan. And I've always had this mentality where I want to be the best player that I could possibly be. And I quickly realised that if I just sit back and sit back on your laurels on what you've achieved, as opposed to moving forward and wanting to continue to improve, I'm not going to improve. I'm going to sort of stunt that growth. So I'm very much about wanting to get better, wanting to improve. And I'm of the mindset that my best footy is still ahead of me. And people can tell me otherwise and tell me I'm a bit crazy, but that's certainly how I think, how I train, and how I motivate myself to get the training and play games.
Again, I don't want to sort of paint a picture, and you can absolutely hit it for six if you want, but I was thinking about your career before we were doing this, and there are some people we talk to and their career sort of potters along at a level, and some reach heights and don't get back there again. But looking at your career, it almost feels like it's been an enormous roller coaster. I mean, you have had some extraordinary highs: Super Rugby Player of the Year, World Cup finals, Bledisloe Cups, Tri Nations, etc. And yet there've also been some really crushing lows, seasons where the Reds couldn't win, and Lions series, etc., etc. Do you look back and think, Jesus Christ, this has been one hell of a ride? Or is it just the way that your career has played out and it is what it is?
To be honest, I think it's just the way that it's played out. I mean, I don't look back and I do have one. When I look back at my footy career, and the one thing I really wish that we could write was the Lions series in 2013. That's something that when I think about still certainly disappoints me. But I'm the type of person that I look back on those things now and understand that all the things that didn't go well, that were disappointing, only served to make me stronger. There were times where I was dropped from the test team. There were times where we had seasons at the Reds where we were terrible. But for me, I never sort of wavered in this belief around wanting to continue to improve and get better. And I always saw those disappointments as just lessons for growth, lessons to get better. And I guess it goes back to talking about reflecting on my career. I don't really look back on those sorts of things, because I understand I am now where I am because of all of it: the good, the bad, the ugly, the success, the failure. And I tend to sort of embrace it all, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Do you look back and can you pinpoint moments in your career where they will live with you forever? I mean, the real highs, the title with the Reds, debut for the Wallabies, etc. Do you have particular memories that you do treasure, or is it all just one story?
There's one season I'd say I treasure the most, and I talk about this to quite a lot, was the 2010 season at the Reds. Probably above all the seasons I've played. I really enjoyed that season because I started the Reds at the end of 2006 and we were terrible. We'd be coming second last. We'd win one game a year. And then in 2009, things slowly started to turn. I think we started to win some games, but guys like myself and Quade and a couple of others were coming through and sort of started to realize our potential and play to our ability, and were given a little bit more ownership within the team. And then 2010, we had Ewan McKenzie come on board with Jim Mackay, who was our attack coach. And they sort of gave us the keys to the team and said, you guys, we're going to play a style of game that suits the way you guys want to play. Here's the keys, you run it. And we just had this freedom to express ourselves out on the field and play what we saw with a very simple game structure. And it's probably the most enjoyable rugby that I feel like I've ever played and been a part of. But then just that season as young kids, we were 22, playing good rugby, enjoying ourselves. Ewan McKenzie said we had two rules. You had to wear the right gear and turn up on time. So we sort of took the piss out of that a little bit. You know, we'd celebrate our wins pretty hard and make sure we just turned up in the right gear and on time. So, mate, it was a really enjoyable season. And that's certainly one I look back on and really smile about, because it was so much fun.
The glory days. Am I right in thinking when you came through in the Reds, was that the ending of the tenure of Eddie Jones?
Man, I was there for his first year. His first and only year.
Wow. Yeah, the 1 year, yes. How was that as an experience?
Mate, that was an experience. I'd say to this day, I would not be the player that I am without Eddie Jones, purely because he was one of the most intense human beings and intense coaches ever. But because of that, he instilled in me such great habits. You know, the understanding of, as an 18-year-old being a part of that system, you have to learn how to be a professional in terms of your training, your work ethic, your attitude towards the game. And he was so hard on you. He'd send you messages and be like, have you watched this game? What do you think about 3-3? What do you think about this? Have you done your extras today? And if you didn't, he'd absolutely tear strips off you. But he wanted you, he just, in that brief period, he just taught me everything I needed to learn about being a professional. And that was directly, but also indirectly, in terms of how he would just tear shreds of players. And you always thought to yourself, right, I'm going to do the right thing because I don't want that to be me in front of the team.
I remember Matt Gitto telling a very funny story about the time he called Eddie Jones mate, and it did a brilliant impression. But Matt was saying that he still has this sort of schoolboy headmaster relationship, and even though Gitto's played 100 and whatever times it is for the Wallabies and played all around the world, he still sort of shrinks and cowers a little bit when he comes up against Eddie. Are you way past that, or do you understand where Gitto's coming from with that kind of
no,
never quite comfortable?
I absolutely understand where he's coming from, because I'm exactly the same. When I see him, I turn back into that 18-year-old kid at Ballymore, thinking, what have I done? Have I done my extras? Is he going to ask me, like, have I watched Aaron Smith or Ben Young's? Like, he just has this presence about him that makes you want to be the best version of yourself, but is also quite scary. And it's one of the things I really enjoyed about him. He would inspire you to be the best you can through fear, which was quite funny. Amazing how people can still live rent free in world superstars' heads. Really, did you see it? Did you speak with him post quarterfinal in 2019? Was there a handshake and a well done, or does modern rugby not really allow for that kind of thing? No, we didn't get the opportunity to do that. I think you're right. Modern rugby probably doesn't allow for the beers and the change rooms and things like that as much as it used to. But I had a chat to him a couple of times. We played England. I think it was 2017 and 2018 after the Test matches, and it was nice to catch up and have a laugh and have a joke around. He's a good man, Eddie. Like I said, I credit him enormously for the success and the longevity that I've had in my career, because it was so important for me to learn at such a young age all the lessons that he taught me.
Yeah, which is great to hear. You've played with some absolute worldies in Australian rugby. I mean, are there other players who you came up through the ranks with, alongside, against, who you look back now and think, Christ, they put hairs on the chest of a young kid and they taught me what I needed to know?
But I was a huge fan of George Smith. And I remember walking into my first Wallaby team, walking into the hotel, and I remember looking at, there were guys like Sterling Mort, like Rocky Elson, Matt Giddo. But the one person that I was just incredibly nervous of was George, because he's an absolute legend of the game. And a funny story, we had a 3K time trial, right, which we did before as soon as we all got into camp, and George came dead last, and so Celeste Mafu beat him. Celeste's about 140 kilos. He's a prop, and George came dead last and ran some terrible time. But then anytime we were out on the field for training or we were playing in a test match, the man was just absolutely everywhere. He was the fittest bloke on the field. He was everywhere, and I couldn't believe it. I was thinking, this bloke, he's coming dead last. He's getting lapped by like Giddo and Adamashi Cooper. But then you put him out in the footy field, and he's a beast. He's everywhere. So to play with someone like him, someone I looked up to and idolized so much, was incredibly special. But more than that, it was incredible to see what they were like in and around the team environment.
Amazing. Yeah, I always remember Jason Leonard saying that by the end of his career, he said to Woodward, "I'll either give you a warm up or I'll give you a game. You pick which one you want." And maybe George was of a sort of similar school where you're just a bit selective about where you put your effort. It's interesting.
100%.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit about your time in France. I mean, if Japan is wonderful and the Reds was amazing, where does France sit in the list of, I suppose, enjoyable escapades and achievements?
Mate, France was really enjoyable. The first season I went there, it was immediately after the World Cup. I actually injured my knee, so I didn't play the first 7 months. And the funny thing about being in rehab over there is you're not at the club. You know, I was at Stade Francais. They send you away to like a hospital with like car crash victims. It's like a proper rehabilitation center with car crash victims, people who've had skiing accidents. So I would go there every morning after my surgery from 9 till 2. And just work with the physio there next to like people who were in wheelchairs and things like that because of that had serious trauma and accidents. What was funny was I didn't see any of the boys at the club for the first 6 months of my time there. And I remember I gradually got back to the point where I was going back to the club and training, but only in the afternoon. And I was speaking to one of the guys there, and he said to me, "Oh, look, don't worry about what all the boys are saying about you. We're looking forward to having you play." And I said, "Hang on, what are the boys saying about me?" And he goes, "Oh, they're just saying, why they pay you so much money and you haven't played yet and you're not even at the club." I remember thinking to myself, "Oh, man, I better get this right so I can go out and play." But that was the first season, so that was pretty difficult. But then the second season, once I got out there and played some consistent rugby, like the French turned so easily. They loved me. We enjoyed our time together. We ended up winning the Challenge Cup, I think, in 2017, and I had another season on my contract and they wanted me to stay, but I'd already made the decision to head back to Australia. So it was an interesting time, but really enjoyable. I feel very fortunate to have been able to live in Paris and have experienced all of that, everything about French rugby. And it's certainly lived up to everything they say.
Amazing. And when you talk about sort of coaching in years to come, do you want to go back to Australia to do that and put something back into the pot? Are you very happy in Japan and you can see a future there? Do you want to come up to the Northern Hemisphere and have a crack at it up here? Where would you see yourself in 2-3 years' time with a clipboard?
Mate, ideally, I'd like to stay here because, like I said, the culture here is very conducive to wanting to get better and improve. And I've been doing a lot of work with the halfbacks here around, skill acquisition, getting better around passing, kicking, running game, decision making, things that they're looking at. So I like that sort of avenue of coaching where it's about maybe a little bit specific towards halfback, but more around skill acquisition. So I'd like to stay here for another couple of years and play, and then potentially move into some sort of coaching role around that skill sort of attack coach space. That's sort of the dream.
Interesting. Good to put it out there, just so that everyone knows. And
yeah,
we'll put your agent's details at the bottom of the screen. I'd love to ask you a little bit as well about your heritage and your love for Papua New Guinea. I was reading a really interesting article from, I think it's probably quite a few years ago, with Genia Robinson, who's one of the sort of respected Aussie rugby journalists out there. Does your life in Papua New Guinea, are you still very much part of it? Do you head back there quite a bit? Do you not get back as much as you'd like? Where's your relationship with where you grew up?
Mate, Papua New Guinea will always be home for me. My folks still live there. My older brother lives there with his wife and his 3 kids. And I was born there. I grew up there. The only reason I moved to Australia when I was 12 was to go to high school. And if professional rugby didn't pan out the way that it did, I would certainly have gone back and be living there right now. So it's certainly my home. I get back there once, twice, sometimes 3 times a year because, like I said, the family still lives back there. And yeah, like I said, I very much identify myself as being Papua New Guinean and that being my home.
And how do you? I mean, do you love the change of going from somewhere like Osaka, which I imagine is sort of military lines and very organised? Is that very very different to where you grew up and how you grew up?
Mate, the way I grew up, it's the absolute best. You're right. They're polar opposites because when we grew up, like it's very much communal living back home. So as a young kid growing up, we were always for the first couple of years from when I was born, we lived with my auntie and uncle. So we lived in the same house with my cousins. And then as we grew older, obviously my parents, we got a house, but you'd always have your cousins over, your aunties over, your uncles over. Everyone was always there. It was always about being outside, going fishing, sort of very loose behavior, you know what I mean? No real structure around, just no real structure. You're living, you're living back home in Papua New Guinea. You go fishing, you live on the beach, you're climbing trees, you're doing all that sort of stuff. And for me, it was the best way to grow up. It was absolutely the best way to grow up. And it's why it holds a special place in my heart and why I always try to get back as much as I can.
And when you go back, are you Will Genia, Test Centurion, Wallaby captain, super rugby player of the year, or are you Will who grew up on the beach and frankly didn't put the bins out and do the dishes when he was asked to?
No, I'm just one of the family. It's funny growing up back home in a Pacific Island sort of culture. It's always about respecting your elders, and I've got an older brother, so when we go home, he's the boss. Whatever he says goes. He gets all the respect and things like that. So it's been good because it kind of grounds you a bit instead of getting a big head. So that's the way it is when we go back home.
Got you. Yeah, some things never change in sort of family hierarchies. And tell me a little bit, how is Quaid these days? I mean, obviously, is he enjoying his rugby? Is he about to step back in the boxing ring? Where's he at with the various challenges he's got going on?
Mate, he's in a really good space. I think he's probably similar to me in that he's just really enjoying his rugby here. He's enjoying the fact that he's a part of a winning environment. Obviously, we've been successful the last couple of years. Granted it's Division 2, but when you're winning, you're winning. And he's just he's really enjoying himself, mate. He's in a good space and he's playing some really good rugby as well.
The final thing I wanted to ask you about: are you still doing stuff with UNICEF, or have I made that up?
Yes.
Tell me a bit about that. How did that come about, and what do you do for UNICEF?
Well, so initially it started through helping them out with vaccinations for polio, because that was a serious issue at the time back in Papua New Guinea. So they asked me to get on board as far as messaging and doing a little bit of video promotion. But obviously with everything happening with COVID, there's a certain sort of resistance and reluctance to not only the vaccine back home in Papua New Guinea, but also the just taking COVID seriously and understand that it's something that affects us in so much more of a way globally than what we think. So the idea was to sort of get on board with them and help in terms of getting that message across of how important the vaccine is, but also how important it is to take COVID seriously and listen to the measures that are getting put in place by the government in order to try and sort of curb the spread and help us get back to some sense of normality. That's kind of how the relationship started, and that's a lot of the work that I've been doing with them at the moment.
Interesting. Is that something you're keen to continue with and develop? Can you run that alongside coaching?
Yeah, definitely. Because as passionate as I am about, say, rugby and coaching, at its core, it's about helping people, and I'm also incredibly passionate about, obviously, Papua New Guinea. It's my home. It's where I come from. So the idea of being involved with UNICEF in order to help people get a better grasp and understanding of what COVID means and sort of spread that message around taking it seriously in the vaccine is certainly something that I'd like to continue to work with them on, but also moving forward, work with them on other things to do with Papua New Guinea and UNICEF.
Yours is a hell of a story. I won't sort of. I mean, I'm sure you know that, but you talk to a lot of players, and it's rugby. You've got some amazing chapters in the autobiography. Have you written an autobiography? You going to write a book?
No, I think I'm too boring, man. I haven't even thought about it. People have asked me to do it, but I've not really thought too much about it.
Do you? I'd love to know how you. And I know you don't do too much reflection, but I'm going to put you on the spot. I mean, how do you assess what you've achieved so far? Are you proud of what you've done and where you've been and all that you've done, or is it just will I get on with it kind of thing? You should be.
I think the thing that I'm probably proud of the most is, so when I was a kid growing up, I sort of paint a picture. When I was a kid growing up, we never played competitive sport, right? As because growing up in Papua New Guinea, we would go to church every Saturdays, and and we were Seventh-day Adventists. So, and sport was obviously played on Saturdays. So we never played competitive sport at that level. We'd always played a lot of backyard sport and things like that. So that's kind of how we'd play backyard cricket, basketball, and things like that. But on Saturdays, we could never play as part of competition. Then when I moved to Brisbane for school, started getting into playing sport and things like that. And, became good at footy. Played Queensland 16s and Queensland schoolboys. But I was always told I was never that good, and always told that I'd never make it. The biggest achievement that I'd make would be playing for Queensland schoolboys and Queensland 16s and things like that. So I remember thinking to myself, all right, I'm not going to go out there to try and be the best in the world or, win a World Cup or whatever it is. I'm just going to be true to myself and do everything I can to be the best that I could possibly be. That was always something that I would always, that was my goal throughout my whole footy career. That's always been my goal, even to this day. And when I look back on it, that's the biggest thing I'm probably proud of, was I never wavered in that being the center and at the core of what I wanted to achieve. Because when things got hard, when I had to do extras, whether it was passing, kicking, it wasn't, I want to be better than this guy, I want to be better than that guy. It wasn't, I want to prove that person wrong. It was, I want to be the best that I can be so that when I finish, I have no regrets. So when I look back, that's the one thing that I'm most proud of, is that I never wavered with that being at the core of everything I wanted to do, to be the best that I could be, no matter what.
It sort of feels like there's some very exciting chapters to come as well. Are you excited for the future? Are you somebody who sort of is, yeah, great, bring it on. What's next? Let's find it.
Yeah, definitely, mate. You sort of got to be, especially when you're at the back end of something that's been such a huge part of your life. There is so much unknown out there, and you've just got to. It's interesting. I had a chat to Johnny Wilkinson about it not too long ago, and his big thing was embracing the unknown and being excited for whatever challenges you'll face. And that's certainly the way it feels like for me moving forward. Is I'd like to play another 2 years, but you don't know what happens. I'd like to move into coaching, but you don't know if that's something that's going to happen. But if you continue to work hard, you continue to maintain that same attitude of wanting to be the best that you can be, the unknown is incredibly exciting, something that you look forward to.
Good on you. It's been very, very nice to chat. I'm hugely grateful for your time. Good luck this weekend. Best to Quaid. And we'd love to check in again. I'm sure there's some very interesting stories that we've got nowhere near. But love to keep in touch. Love to pick up again. And Will, thank you so much for your time. Hugely grateful.
No, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me. Really do appreciate it. Thank you.